everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GBNews,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, mate. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Hi there and welcome to Brazier. Some fast-paced news from 4 until 6 in the next hour for you. Kemi Badenoch has become the latest Conservative leadership contender to be eliminated from the race. In the penultimate ballot before the contest is reduced to 2 final candidates, she received 59 votes, with Liz Truss the next best on 86. Attention now shifting to whether supporters of Badenoch switch to Liz Truss or Penny Mordaunt as front-runner Rishi Sunak looks near on set to be in the final runoff vote amongst Conservative members. There's been a record temperature today, recorded 40.2 Celsius in the UK. The nation gripped by this sweltering heat wave. While many have been outside enjoying the sun, there's also been widespread travel disruption. And within the last hour, London Fire Brigade declaring a major incident after a series of small fires, in some cases quite big fires, across the capital today. With me for the next 2 hours, the author and broadcaster Christine Hamilton. But first, let's bring you the latest news headlines with Rosie.
Good afternoon. It's just 1 minute past 4. I'm Rosie Wright, keeping you up to date on GB News. London Fire Brigade has declared a major incident in response to a huge surge in fires across the capital during today's record-breaking heatwave. 100 firefighters are currently tackling a blaze which has spread to a residential area in Wennington in Greater London. Now, meanwhile, 2 grass fires have also broken out in Kent. 12 fire engines are tackling the blazes at Dartford Heath and Joyce Green. Kent Fire and Rescue Service are warning drivers on the A2 to take extra care as the smoke is causing reduced visibility. Well, the UK has recorded a temperature of over 40 degrees for the first time. The Met Office say a provisional reading of 40.2 degrees has been measured at Heathrow in London. Red extreme warnings continue for millions of people in England, with amber warnings for most of Britain. Last night, temperatures didn't fall below 25 Celsius in places, making it the UK's hottest night on record. National Rail has told people to only travel if absolutely necessary. Many train services across the country have been cancelled. A major search operation's underway for a missing swimmer in Essex. The Coast Guard have confirmed 5 swimmers were rescued from the water around Clacton Pier. 2 have been taken to hospital. Emergency services are currently trying to find the one who's missing. Now to politics, and as we've been hearing, Kemi Badenoch is out of the Conservative leadership race. Former Chancellor Rishi Sunak secured the most votes, with support from 118 MPs. The Trade Minister, Penny Mordaunt, came second with 92 votes. Foreign Secretary Liz Truss secured 86. Now, the next and last ballot among MPs takes place tomorrow, where the candidates will be whittled down to the final two. Then the Conservative Party membership will choose the next Prime Minister. Tory MP Justin Tomlinson had been backing Kemi Badenoch.
She didn't think she'd survive those early rounds, and each round we went up, and the momentum was very much with us. A huge amount of excitement and intrigue amongst colleagues, and frankly, she was a breath of fresh air that added that extra layer of intrigue to this contest. And I'm just disappointed, genuinely disappointed, that we couldn't get her over the line today. We had a lot of conversations, but we couldn't just quite do it. But to come forth from that standing start with it's something that all of us can be very proud of.
As the race to replace him ramps up, Boris Johnson has chaired his final cabinet meeting. The Prime Minister defended his record on tackling COVID and steering the economy through the pandemic and the cost of living crisis. Mr Johnson also reaffirmed the government's commitment to reaching net zero emissions by 2050. Wages are falling at the fastest rate since records began when you take into account rising prices. The latest data from the ONS shows paychecks dropped by 3.7% over the 3 months to May when compared against inflation. Meanwhile, the number of UK workers on payroll has risen by 31,000 to 29.6 million between May and June. Meanwhile, our grocery bills have increased by over £450 in the last year. Retail research firm Kantar says the increase comes after the food and drink inflation hit the second highest level on record. Dog food, butter and milk are some of the products that have risen the fastest over the last 12 months. This is GB News. We'll bring you more as it happens. Now, let's head back to Colin.
Hi there, it's 4:05. Thought we'd be leading on the Tory leadership contest this afternoon. We'll get round to that, but there's been things going on with these record-breaking temperatures and some of the problems that's caused, because Britain really basting in those record-breaking temperatures today. New UK high, 40.2 centigrade, recorded in West London, a weather station at Heathrow Airport detailing that. And the capital city really felt the heat and is feeling the heat in a way that was really rather destructive. Within the last hour, London Fire Brigade declaring a major incident after its firefighters were called out to tackle multiple fires. Social media is filled with pictures of blazes in various locations across the capital city and indeed beyond. In Kent, for instance, a dozen fire engines tackling one grass fire. But elsewhere, what started as a fire in a wheat field quickly enveloped surrounding homes and businesses. Let's turn to Mark White, who's covering this. And Mark, before I let you get underway, Christine Hamilton's our studio guest today, by the way, and I know Christine's going to be interested in this story. I'm just looking at a list just issued by London Fire Brigade, and I'm going to take a moment, just if you don't mind, to read it share it with our viewers and listeners, because it gives you a sense of just what we're talking about here. 30 fire engines, grass fire in Upminster, 15 fire engines, the Wennington, that's near Upminster, 12 fire engines, Pinner, 10 fire engines, restaurant fire, Southgate, 8 fire engines, Croydon, 8 fire engines, Dagenham, 8 fire engines, Wembley, 6 fire engines, Hendon, 4 fire engines, Croydon, 4 fire engines, Eltham. Mark, they're not going to have much left.
No, and these are the incidents of note. And in addition to that, there are multiple dozens of fires right across the capital city, as you would expect in any given day. We'll add to that these very significant blazes that require a very significant turnout, and the biggest of them being that fire in Upminster, Pease Lane, I think nearby, with those 30 fire engines, 200 firefighters were told in attendance at that particular incident. Just south of there is the incident that's been causing, I think, most concern in terms of the images that were coming out. Wennington, a village of about 300 people, not far from Dartford Crossing. It was a grassland fire, still is burning in the grasslands around the village there. But the wind shifted, blew it right towards the village, and a number of structures, properties, several homes included, have been engulfed with by flames in that particular village. Add to that the other grass fires that are still being fought in other parts of London, in particular down in Croydon, where they're tackling 2 major grass fires in that area of South London with, again, a significant turnout, you can then see why they have now declared this a major incident.
Yeah, I just wonder what the cause of these blazes. I mean, obviously, it's incredibly hot, right? London Fire Brigade are pointing out that don't be using barbecues, to which you say, well, surely people aren't stupid enough to be lighting barbecues near tinderbox conditions. Answer there comes, they often are that stupid, actually. But, I mean, so many fires going to have different causes, aren't they?
Yeah, I mean, there could be multiple causes, but I think anybody looking at grassland generally, football pitches and alike over recent months, recent weeks in particular, because we haven't had much in the way of rain, you can see the colour it's turned. They are tinder dry, and all it takes is a spark. And you have things like discarded bottles that line fields. The magnification of the sun is often a very significant and frequent cause of these grassland fires. Then, of course, there are some people who go out of their way to cause fires themselves, to deliberately start these blazes.
It tends to happen later, doesn't it?
Yeah.
People see the fires, then days later they start them. We're going to keep across, as we run those pictures, let's just keep running those pictures if we possibly can. Apologies if you're listening on the radio. But, I mean, they're remarkable pictures for this country, Christine.
You expect in Australia or southern Spain, isn't it?
Do you know, you mentioned bottles, something which women should be particularly aware of. Like many women, I have a magnifying mirror on my bathroom windowsill. This time of the year, don't leave it there. When you finish doing your bits, take it down and put it on the floor, because a friend of ours, their house burnt down because of that. A makeup magnifying mirror, sun's rays got it. She went to the supermarket, came back, and her house was ablaze.
And again, people leaving dogs in cars, it happens every time, doesn't it? You know? And just in terms of, we're not good at measuring the heat. We rely on science and scientists to do that.
Blooming not.
Blooming not. I mean, just as an example, Christine, I got in the car to drive here this lunchtime, window down, hand out, and normally you get that temperature differential, don't you? That it's a little bit cooler outside as you're feeling the wind against your hand. No difference at all.
No difference.
Extraordinarily hot.
I'm afraid I got straight in the car and the air conditioning straight on. I wasn't going to risk it.
Yeah. Mark, the London Fire Brigade can cope, can't they? They've got the resources for this.
They can cope. They will, without a doubt, I think, be calling on mutual aid, though, which means that there are fire services all around the home counties, neighbouring London, that can assist if required. They have enough in the way of appliances in London to cope with a significant number of blazes at any given time. But we are talking a major incident declared now. Clearly, they feel they're at the point where they may well be calling on mutual aid. The difficulty is, in calling on mutual aid, you call Kent. Kent Fire and Rescue Service are currently involved in dealing with multiple grassland fires in their own fire brigade area. And that will be the same in Surrey, and it will be the same in Hampshire and other surrounding forces.
Mark, you and I are very suspicious of the London-centric nature of modern media news reporting. It's odd, isn't it? This will be going on in other parts of the country. It's just not through yet.
It absolutely is.
What we need is what happened in the 1970s when we had that incredible spell of hot weather. The Prime Minister, Harold Wilson, appointed a Minister for Water. Do you remember? Dennis Howell. And almost within 24 hours of Dennis Howell being appointed, we had torrential rain. We'd had no rain for weeks and weeks and weeks, which we're getting to that now. We need a Minister for Water.
The flip side of this, of course, for rare weather events, do you remember you'll get something which will stop all the airports with snow and ice once every 4 or 5 years. But when it happens, people say, why don't we have hundreds of snowplows?
It's absurd.
You say because we only use them every once 5 or 6 years. Ditto this weather, though it may be becoming a little bit more common, sad to say. Well, on that topic, let's turn to the meteorologist and weather presenter, Aidan McGivern, who can give us some pointers as to where this weather's going. Aidan, welcome to you. Appreciate your time. Look, it's a matter for London Fire Brigade, isn't it? But from the meteorologist's position that there are these tinderbox conditions, and when the fire gets a grip, the air temperature presumably just makes it very easy to spread.
Yeah, it's been really dry across some parts of the country this summer and through the spring as well. So we've had that deficit in rainfall, and then along comes a heat wave, strong sun this time of year. We're at peak solar insolation at the moment, and so all the ingredients are there right now for these fires, sadly.
Just setting the fires to one side, we're looking at the pictures now, and it's extraordinary. Black smoke billowing into the air, and I'm sure this is a imagery that's been repeated in many, many different parts of the country. Just on to the story we expected in a sense to be covering today, record-breaking temperatures. I know that won't be forgotten. But one thing that struck me, Aidan, from, say, 10, 20 years ago, is the absolute precision of the forecasting business that you're into now, whether it's the help of all those supercomputers and the computing power that you've got behind you now. When you said it was going to break, when you and others said it was going to break 40 today, I was scratching my head even last night thinking, well, will it? It has.
Yeah, and even though we were confident with that forecast here at the Met Office, it was still hard to believe that 40 degrees would be reached in the UK. And the fact that the previous temperature record was 38.7, that was set in 2019. So to beat that record by 1.5 degrees, and not just in London, we've seen that broken in St James's Park and Heathrow, but also in Coningsby, in Lincolnshire. And at the time that I'm speaking now, it could still go up. 29, at least 29 locations in the UK, from West Yorkshire down to the southeast, have broken that previous all-time temperature records. So it's not just been a London-centric thing. That heat has spread up into northern England, into southern Scotland, where temperatures have been in the low 30s as well. So it's been an extraordinary hot spell, and it's not just confined to one or two spots either.
Aidan, what we don't know is to what extent this is unusual, it's unprecedented, at least since we've kept records. But what we don't know, what we can't know, we can make a guess at, is whether this becomes an annual or semi-annual event, whether this is the way things are from now on.
I believe that 40 Celsius is still a rare event, with or without climate change, but it's becoming more likely. And a recent study suggested that it's now 10 times more likely than it used to be. In fact, before climate change, 40 degrees in this country would have been deemed virtually impossible. Now we've seen it, it's unlikely that it's going to happen every year. It might not happen again for 10 years. But these kinds of hot spells where we're reaching temperatures that we didn't often see in the past are becoming increasingly common. You know, a lot of people talk about 1976. In that year, a really, really long summer, sunny virtually every day of that summer, no doubting that it was a remarkable summer, but the peak temperature that year was 35.9 Celsius. And so today's temperature at a number of sites has been more than 4 degrees above that, and we're seeing that temperature exceeded most years.
Aidan, really good to talk to you. Appreciate your time. Aidan McGivern there. Thanks very much. Christine Hamilton alongside me. I'm just reading, Christine, that all trains into New Street Station in Birmingham cancelled. Problem with the
leaves on the line?
No leaves, no electric power lines. And this is sort of the point I was making about the snowplows and all the rest of it. Yeah. To what extent you spend billions building in the redundancy to these systems and making them resistant to, you know, once every 10-year events?
Exactly. The snowplow example is absolutely right. People scream, why don't we have enough snowplows? Well, because we don't need them except very, very occasionally. And this heat, obviously, if this becomes an annual event, then we will get all the...
So interestingly, the gritters were out actually gritting the roads because it lowers the salt, lowers the temperature, bizarrely.
Does it? Yeah. And also, presumably, if the tarmac starts to melt, the grit will help to stop it get too sticky.
I think we're both voyaging into realms of the unknown.
Exactly, we don't understand.
Of our knowledge. It's hot.
It's hot. I'm not good. Well, I've got my own little personal helper here.
We're going to go to the story we expected to be leading on today about the politics and the Conservative leadership election. The candidates vying for leadership of the Conservative Party and ultimately the keys to number 10 have been whittled down to 3. Kemi Badenoch, ending what had been quite a run, eliminated from the contest just a fraction over an hour ago. It follows Tom Tugendhat's exit from the race last night, receiving 31 votes as he did. Attention will now be on whether Kemi Badenoch's 59 supporters switch allegiance to Liz Truss or Penny Mordaunt as Rishi Sunak looks near to securing his place in the final 2 with 118 votes, needing 120 to reach the final runoff. Let's turn to our political correspondent, Tom Harwood, who's been guiding me through these votes over the course of the last week and a half and more. Tom, welcome to you. I'm looking at who got what votes today in terms of where Tugendhat supporters went. Well, Liz Truss got 15 extra votes, improved her tally by 15, Penny Mordaunt by 10, which is not what you would have expected. You would have expected Mordaunt to do better, perhaps.
You certainly would have done, and this has raised a great deal of eyebrows in terms of were these votes genuine votes for some of these candidates, and just how much churn has there been? Might the Rishi Sunak campaign, which only extraordinarily went up by just 3 votes this time, might there actually be more secret backers of Rishi Sunak lending their votes elsewhere to try and manipulate the contest? That's certainly something that some rival camps suspect may have been going on. Potentially Rishi Sunak's support is larger in the parliamentary party than it appears in that number, and some votes are being lent around. Of course, that's what we understand to have happened back in 2019 when Boris Johnson was standing to become Prime Minister. A lot of the magic behind the scenes of his campaign was done by Gavin Williamson, the former Education Secretary, but also, crucially, former Chief Whip, a parliamentary magician who is now working on the Rishi Sunak campaign. So lots of eyebrows raised about just how these numbers divide, and frankly the fact that Kemi Badenoch's vote went up by 1 today as well is a little surprising, and suggests that that may well have been inflated by some and churn going on elsewhere. But the long and short of it is, however we've arrived here, we have arrived here. The final 3 in this contest are Rishi Sunak, Penny Mordaunt and Liz Truss. And going forward to tomorrow, 2 of them will be arrived at. By 4 p.m. tomorrow, we will know which 2 candidates go out to the membership as a whole. And looking at the way things are going, looking at the Kemi Badenoch support, if it were legitimate, and I suppose we do have to some extent, to a large extent, take these numbers at face value. Yes, there will be jiggling around at the edges, but fundamentally you can't lend that many votes to other camps. It is unlikely that the Kemi vote goes predominantly for Penny Mordaunt. So the question is, to what degree does it split between Rishi Sunak and Liz Truss? There are only 6 votes between Liz Truss and Penny Mordaunt now. If I were a betting individual, I would say that it's more likely than not that the final 2 that go out to the membership will be Rishi Sunak versus Liz Truss.
Yeah, feels that way. Tom, thanks very much indeed. Christine Hamilton, keen follower of politics alongside me today, and other news stories too, but this is dominating the airwaves to some degree for a fortnight or thereabouts, hasn't it? Let's just think about Kemi Badenoch, who's out.
Oh,
who's
well,
out
I
today,
mean,
but she said, if her supporters had said you'll be through to the last 4 a fortnight ago, nobody would have believed you.
Well, would anybody have believed it? Right, any of us went then. She was such a breath of fresh air. I mean, how would Keir Starmer have coped with her? He wouldn't have known where to begin. He simply wouldn't have known where
Was she that tested? Did we really know by the stage?
This, of course, is the problem. She had very little experience when she'd been a Treasury Minister, but she had no frontline experience. People didn't know who she was. I would have been prepared to take a punt on Kemi if I'd been one of those Tory MPs. I now think we are back where we started, which is it's going to be Rishi or Liz. That is where we started right at the beginning of this whole thing. And one forgets, actually, all the sort of relatively big beasts who've now been thrown by the wayside, whether it's, you can forget who they are now, Jeremy Hunt and
Nadeem
Zahawi and all that.
Javid,
exactly, Sajid Javid. It is quite extraordinary that Kemi Badenoch has hung on so far. I do find it extraordinary also that the Tory membership, I mean, it's so undemocratic, 180,000 of them, largely over 60, largely white, largely living in the south, are going to decide the next Prime Minister, but there we are. Why can't they have a bigger choice? Why can't we make this take a little bit longer? Why can't they have maybe 3, if not 4? And whittle it down with at least the members choosing. It seems to me a very sudden, brutal drop from whatever it was, 11 candidates. We're so quickly going to get down to 2.
And just on the Kemi question, I mean, I know that political parties don't behave like grown-up corporate entities. In other words...
Nor do MPs, do they?
You know, a big company will have a succession plan. Who takes over as next chief executive officer? A football club, who takes over as the next football coach? Arguably, political parties don't behave that way. If they did, surely whoever's the next Prime Minister would look at Kemi Badenoch and say, maybe that's where the future lies, push her into one of the big 4 offices of state.
Absolutely. I mean, she ought to be possibly Home Secretary or something like that. Wouldn't that be an inspired choice?
We'll see, won't we?
You know, she's just such a breath of fresh air. It would wake everybody up. It would suddenly, the Tory party would be reinvigorated, would look brand new. with Sunak or Truss, it's going to look just the same. No change.
Christine, for now, thanks very much indeed. Coming up, more on the heatwave has been causing disruption to the UK's travel networks, as well as all those fires. Yesterday, 2,000 services out of nearly 13,000 across the country were either more than 30 minutes late or they were cancelled altogether. We'll get the latest next from Simon Calder. First, yes, it's the weather.
Hello, I'm Aidan McGivern from the Met Office. Extraordinary temperatures today, with the UK seeing highs over 40 Celsius for the first time on record. It is turning cooler, you may be pleased to hear, with much fresher air arriving from the west, along with some showers. We're already seeing that happen in the southwest, across parts of Wales and Northern Ireland. A couple of cold fronts making their way in from the west. They will displace the heat over the next 24 hours. They will bring some showers into the Midlands, eastern England during the evening. Some welcome relief, I think, from the excessively high temperatures during the afternoon. And then overnight, well, that fresher air arrives, but still a fairly muggy night. 18 in Cardiff, 20 in London, 14 for Belfast and Glasgow. And it's a fine start, actually, for eastern and central parts of the country. Some sunshine first thing. Thicker cloud for Wales, the southwest, Northern Ireland, as well as parts of Scotland, with a few showers around. Now, the temperatures will rise through the day, nowhere near as high as we've seen during Tuesday, but enough to bring the risk of showers or thunderstorms to central and southeastern parts of the country. Perhaps some very lively downpours. 28 Celsius in London, 30 possible for eastern England, but a fresher low to mid-20s for western areas and high teens, low 20s for Scotland and Northern Ireland. Any showers or thunderstorms clear through during Wednesday evening, and then overnight clear spells once again. And by this time, it really will be a fresher night, with temperatures in the south, 15 or 16 Celsius, 12 or 13 for Scotland and Northern Ireland. Then some low cloud to begin things on Thursday across eastern and central England. A few spots of rain out of this. Some showers for the northwest of Scotland as well, but the cloud in the east will tend to lift, as Thursday's looking like a mostly dry day with some sunny spells and temperatures closer to average. Showers on Friday and a few around as well on Saturday.
Tonight on GB News. At 6, it's Deebs & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Mark Stein. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV. On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment. We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood, and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today. I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked. Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, Matt. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Lots of emails on the subject of the temperature today, record-breaking temperature. But just first this, our friends at the Press Association tell us that more than 1 million NHS workers, they include nurses, paramedics and midwives, will get a pay rise of at least £1,400, lowest earners to receive up to 9.3%. Don't know how many people that is. Eligible dentists and doctors, 4.5%, and police officers, 5%, according to the government being quoted by the Press Association. More on that a little later on. Those emails then on the heat. David says, I'm in York. This afternoon we got to 40 degrees when leaving work. Keith says, to what extent does urbanisation affect the high temperatures? What measurements are taken in the middle of woodland areas? Good question. Paddy says, the heat wave is finished here where I am. Clouds have rolled in. Rain is imminent and we're dropping 11 degrees over the next hour. I wish that would happen here. It's somewhere west. Christine Hamilton noises off there. Commuters have been warned not to travel by train today. The majority of services in central, northern and southeastern England cancelled due to safety concerns about steel tracks, which of course can buckle a little bit when they become too hot. Yesterday, 2,000 services from 12,800 across the country were either more than 30 minutes late or cancelled altogether. The travel editor of The Independent, Simon Calder, is here in the studio. He's here mainly for the air conditioning.
Yes.
And if only it would work, Simon.
Well, look, it's a really interesting picture out there. I've been following this since, well, clearly yesterday morning when we were told do not travel for the first time. We had the unprecedented decision by Network Rail to close completely the East Coast Main Line. That's the one which runs from here in London to Yorkshire to Tyneside and up to Scotland. And also this afternoon, the East Midlands Railway from London St Pancras International to Leicester to Derby to Nottingham and to Sheffield also closed. We've had massive problems on the West Coast Main Line, but actually these are not direct results of the excessive heat and speed restrictions. It's, for example, a tree fallen over near Harrow and Wiltshire.
And there was a fire on the bank and the embankment.
Yes, exactly. A line-side fire at Hatch End, and that is clearly quite possibly a result of the hot weather. But bizarrely, quite a lot of trains are kind of getting through when you'd expect them not to. On Chiltern Railway, another one where we were told do not travel. Well, I've just checked the lunchtime train from Birmingham, got in a couple of minutes ahead of time. And once you get out of London and I've checked all the way around, so Brighton, Cardiff, Manchester, Leeds, particularly Scotland, Glasgow, Edinburgh, things are kind of looking all right.
And Simon, just on the point there in my introduction, talking about rails buckling and that sort of thing, I mean, if you're a train driver, presumably there's a bit of tolerance. You can take a bit of buckling, but not too much.
Oh, well, look, the boffins, if I may, at Network Rail are extremely good at what they do, which is why the railways are so safe. And there are clear specifications for what's tolerable and what isn't. And they want to avoid any buckling at all, which is entirely understandable. Nobody wants to have that. Indeed, the Transport Secretary this morning, Grant Shapps, was saying, it could cause a derailment. We are very, very long way from any risk being taken. And a lot of people have said, well, for goodness sake, let's look at Saudi Arabia, where they've got a new high-speed line, and it gets a heck of a lot hotter than it does here. But of course, what they don't have to do in Saudi Arabia is allow for temperatures to be below
much colder.
freezing.
They're up to 55 degrees, but they're not going to minus 10.
You can engineer for any specification you want. And when the railways were specified, the idea of 40 plus Celsius simply hadn't been thought of.
Well, I mean, Chrissy and I were just talking about this a few moments ago, to what extent you build in the engineering for temperature variations. But why not just paint the rails white?
Well, there's a bit of that going on. It's quite tricky. I mean, you can't just... there were teams actually out at the weekend doing that, in particular in sheltered locations, which were effectively sun traps, because that can reduce by about 5 or 10 degrees Celsius. But what Network Rail has done with the support of the government is basically just say, no, we don't want to take the risk. So I'm kind of looking positive on it, which is that there are an awful lot of trains that are successfully running around Great Britain, and of course in Northern Ireland as well, at a time when you might think, well, there wouldn't be. So what we will see tomorrow is whether we can return to anything like normal, which is the whole idea of closing things down today.
Christine.
Well, presumably, I hope it isn't a really stupid question, presumably when a train goes over the tracks, it increases the heat massively.
Oh, well, that's...
A long express train, by the time it's all gone over one little bit of track, what sort of temperature rise will that have caused?
Well, exactly. And what sort of pressure to put on, because these trains weigh hundreds of tons, and therefore it's the pressure that it puts on. Yes, it does raise the temperature a bit, but more to the point, it stresses the rails, which is why you get the speed restrictions put in. A train travelling at 125 miles an hour exercises an awful lot more stress on the rail than one going at 60 miles an hour, which has been the kind of standard speed restrictions today. Some parts down as low as just 20 miles an hour, but others actually 90 miles an hour.
When they buckle, do they buckle up or do they buckle sideways?
They buckle around like that.
If you are just switching on, you've not caught a rogue episode of British Railways today. This is GB News. We are getting deep into track science.
Technical stuff.
And we'll leave it there, I think. Simon Calder, really appreciate you coming in. Thanks very much indeed. Coming up this afternoon, who really runs Britain? Is it elected representatives, as we might expect, or sometimes unaccountable officials in the depths of Whitehall? My take in the Brazier angle. But first, up to date with the latest news headlines from Polly.
Colin, thank you. As you've been hearing, the London Fire Brigade has declared a major incident in response to a huge surge in fires across the capital during today's record-breaking heatwave. Tackling a blaze which has spread to a residential area in Wennington in Greater London. Fires have broken out in Kent. 12 fire engines are tackling the blazes at Dartford Heath and Joyce Green. Kent Fire and Rescue Service are warning drivers on the A2 to take extra care as the smoke is causing reduced visibility. And as the UK has a temperature of over 40 degrees for the first time ever today, the Met Office says a provisional reading of 40.2 degrees has in fact been measured at Heathrow in London. Red extreme warnings continue for millions of people in England, with amber warnings for most of Britain. And last night, temperatures didn't fall between 25 degrees Celsius in some places, making it the UK's hottest night on record. And a major search operation is underway for a missing swimmer. I'm sorry if you're watching on television, that is the wrong picture that you're looking at there. Concerning the Tory leadership race, let me bring you up to date with the search that's going on for the missing swimmer in Essex. The Coast Guard have confirmed 5 swimmers were rescued from the water around Clacton Pier and 2 have been taken to hospital. The emergency services are trying at the moment to find a 4th swimmer. And back to politics then. Kemi Badenoch is out of the Conservative leadership race. Former Chancellor Rishi Sunak securing most of the votes today in the vote of the 1922 committee. Support coming from 118 MPs. The Trade Minister Penny Mordaunt coming in second with 92 votes. And the Foreign Secretary Liz Truss securing 86 votes. The next and final ballot among MPs takes place tomorrow, where the candidates will be whittled down to the final 2. You're up to date on TV, online and on your radio via DAB+. You're with GB News. Brazier is back in just a bit.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment. We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go? Just take me to the studio, please, Matt. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Who runs Britain? It's obvious, isn't it? The people we elect, the representatives we choose to run the country on our behalf. But wait a minute. If that's true, then why did Boris Johnson say this yesterday?
And the leader of the opposition and the deep state will prevail in its plot to haul us back into alignment with the EU as a prelude to our eventual return.
Just ponder on those words for a moment. Britain will be hauled back into the EU by the deep state. Boris has warned before that Remainers haven't given up, that they see Brexit as an aberration, a temporary aberration that can be reversed. But that was the first time he's publicly invoked the idea of the deep state. What on earth was he playing at? Surely the deep state is the stuff of internet fantasists who believe the government doesn't really run the country. The nation is really run by a shadowy network. I'm not sure I'll be running pictures of Rwanda, but we'll come on to that. According to one poll, half of all Americans believe in the deep state. Donald Trump certainly does. If Boris believes in it too, does that mean he's aligning himself with a conspiracy theory that undermines trust in our institutions? But what if trust in our institutions wasn't undermined by a conspiracy theory? What if trust in our institutions was undermined by those self-same institutions? Take the Home Office. Run those pictures now, where civil servants are reluctant to implement the Rwanda policy. There you go. The Rwanda policy isn't perfect, but it is an expression of the will of the people. A law drafted by the government, we, the people, elected to serve us. How dare unelected civil servants attempt to thwart it? Well, then there's a judiciary. I wondered at the wisdom of the Daily Mail's infamous front page in 2016. Do you remember it? Enemies of the people. After judges told Boris he couldn't invoke Article 50 without a parliamentary fight. I thought it was dangerous to undermine confidence in our judges. But then, 3 years later, the judges undermined it themselves. Supreme Court Judge Lady Hale ruled against the prorogation of Parliament wearing that spider brooch. A silly thing for me to worry about, don't you think? Baroness Hale said it was just a piece of jewellery. She wasn't making a point about spinning a web or any such thing, really. But it felt indulgent at best, contemptuous at worst. A judge seemingly giving a nod and a wink and expecting nobody to notice. We did, Baroness Hale. I could go on. Company chief executives who ignore their employees and customers by going woke, head teachers who ignore parents by teaching trans rights, chief constables who take the knee, university chancellors who suppress free speech, a state broadcaster which takes a compulsory licence fee from millions while holding the values of viewers and listeners in contempt. There is no conspiracy at work, no guiding minds, no clandestine network. But that isn't to say there isn't a deep state. It's what we used to call the establishment. When we called it the establishment, we meant top people in public life who generally held conservative values and felt they knew best. Now, the new establishment, the deep state, is no longer conservative, but it still thinks it knows best. Christine Hamilton's alongside me. The deep state. Dangerous phrase to use and for the Prime Minister, or
well,
reflecting something?
It's a bit like the enemy within and all that sort of thing, isn't it? It takes on a
fifth
momentum
column.
of its own. The thing that worries me is when you get MPs who become ministers and they don't know what they're going to do when they get there. Then that is when the civil service take control. If you get a minister who arrives and he's in charge of cold drinks and he knows exactly what he wants to do, he lays down the law and he will override, because what he wants, he will get. But too many people, when they arrive in ministerial office, they don't really know what they want. And the civil service have been planning their own little plans for months, years, goodness knows what, and they can just push him overtly or discreetly in their direction without the minister, him or her, even realising it.
Boris's specific point was that the deep state, and by which I think he meant more than just the civil service, but they've got a long-term plan to reintegrate Britain into the EU. Do you think that's true?
This is one reason why, back to the leadership, why I worry about Liz Truss, because she was a Remainer. There's a fabulous picture out there of her, you know, huge, great Remain poster, waving flags, etc., etc. If you don't feel leave in your bones, to me, you're not going to get the best from the Brexit dividend. I mean, Boris was only sort of half-hearted, wasn't he? He had these 2 articles written, shall I leave, shall I remain? And it was, I think, in his own best interest, he thought, to go for the leave campaign. But it's what you feel in your bones, and you're then going to stamp it. So, yeah, there are a vast number of people who just they could not believe what happened, they can't believe it happened, and they think they can overturn it. And we need really tough, powerful people at the top who believe in delivering that democratic vote and delivering a proper Brexit.
And just on the phrase deep state, I felt that reference yesterday. There was a lot else going on in Britain and the world, and it was sort of missed. But actually, when you hear the clip that we ran, Boris saying deep state, and you hear, there is a sort of, what?
Gone all the way down.
Well, it clearly shocked somebody in that chamber. And the problem for some people will be that the phrase deep state, rather than, say, the establishment or a fifth column, whatever you want to call it, deep state conjures up stuff on the internet, wacky conspiracy theories.
Grossly embedded already in society. I didn't hear it, unfortunately. I'm rather surrounded by children at home at the moment, so I've rather had my mind on what you might call domestic matters. So I missed it. But now it's rather a spooky statement.
We're going to interrupt our plans for a debate, and we're going to go straight over to the Mayor of Havering, who I think is speaking live. Is that right? Talking about the blaze that's been gripping that area. I think ready to speak to us. Is that right? Or was? It's now disappeared. I tell you what, we'll approach that in a bit more with a bit more purpose and a bit more organisation, and we'll talk to the Mayor of Havering about the blazes, one of the many blazes that have gripped the home counties today, though I suspect other parts of the UK have been just as badly affected. Scores and scores and scores of fire engines are out and about, and imagine being a fireman or firewoman today, heavily clad in that protective clothing as they are dealing with fires and temperatures in excess, in some parts of the country, of more than 40 degrees. Let's move to our debate then. The Tory leadership candidate, Penny Mordaunt, has said her ability to understand the lives of ordinary voters makes her suited, or more suited, to become Prime Minister. In a slick campaign video released after getting through yesterday's vote, she said, "Will your next Prime Minister understand the life you live? Will they have experienced it? Will they bring that experience to government? I have, and I will." So we're asking, does the next Prime Minister have to understand the life you live? We're joined by the Director of Orthodox Conservatives, Joseph Robertson, and broadcaster and journalist Sam Dowler. Welcome to you both. Joseph Robertson, if we start with you, is it necessary for our Prime Minister to have a life that's recognisable to the majority of voters?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, let's start with having a life that's recognisable to the membership of their own party, at the very least. I think we saw that in a microcosm just now, where as Kemi dropped out of the race in the last few hours, you had people saying, why were the YouGov polls, why were the ConHome polls ignored? Why was the wish of the membership not respected in the final two? And why do we have 3 establishment candidates going into the final 3? Why the membership, at the very least, not being listened to? If that's the state of the party, then you have to ask, will the next Prime Minister at all be able to listen to anyone outside of the party, even if they can't listen to their own voters?
Sam Dowler, I suppose that the broader question raised by Penny Mordaunt's words today is whether, say, for instance, somebody who is wealthy, like Rishi Sunak, can understand the lives of people who are on average salaries, for instance.
Well, that's the thing, isn't it, really? What they've all talked about is this massive change that leadership has failed, which is what Penny said a number of times in the debate. Obviously, having somebody, with a multi-millionaire lifestyle and partner doesn't account for that. It's almost Donald Trumpian and like, I'm one of the people. When you're a billionaire, of course you're not. You don't know what it's like to maybe have to use a food bank to various things, especially at the moment in this austerity time.
How many MPs know how many MPs really know how to? How many MPs really know how to use a food bank or have had to use a food bank? I mean, this is where we get to, isn't it? We end up with this ludicrous situation where to be taken seriously and plausible as a politician, you have to have understood all different aspects of life. It's plainly impossible,
though, isn't it? And Penny, what Penny's saying is she has more of a lived experience than what Rishi has. Like, I mean, Rishi, and obviously, and the same as with Liz Truss as well. She went to Oxford, and and these are scenarios that the majority of the British people who the voting electorate won't have experienced. So that's, I think, if it's about, then it should be changed. And I actually like Rishi, so but I do understand where she's coming from. That comment in her video was about that.
Joseph Robertson, aren't we confusing experience with empathy? And what matters more is empathy. I mean, Boris Johnson may be pretty well off, but if he can empathise with a Brexiteer in Bolton or Bridgend, that's what matters.
Sure. I mean, I think the phrase lived experience is in of itself very problematic, simply because no one can live.
I've tried to ban it from this news channel, Joseph, and it just crept through.
Right. Well, I think the issue with lived experience is that no one can live the experience of every other person. The reality is that Rishi's life is equally as valid to, a dustbin man. They are the people. They've both lived experiences. It's a terrible phrase to use. I think what we need to start talking about is advisory. And we need to start thinking about what people actually want. Listening is a good word. MPs do not listen. Tom Tugendhat was the only one who said no when people are asked if he trusted Boris Johnson. And for me, although I disagree with Tom's politics, I thought that was the best moment in everything we've had in the run-up to this leadership. Simply because, finally, we had someone speaking truth and listening with his ear to the ground about what people are really saying on the streets. North Shropshire went to the Lib Dems for a reason. It wasn't because levelling up failed. It was because levelling up was just one little piece of icing on top of all the millions of problems that these people have had for so many months and years that have never been looked at. So you can't live their experiences, but you can listen.
That's well put. Joseph Robertson, Sam Dale, we're going to leave it there. Appreciate your time. Thanks very much indeed. Kristen Hamilton alongside me. Experience or empathy or listening?
No, I think it's empathy and listening, etc. And this is why I think it's such a shame that Kemi's been knocked out of the race, because she was able to... She had an amazing lived experience, if I can just use the phrase once. And I think people could relate to her. They could relate to her as a sort of one of us, even though her experience was totally unlike yours or mine. I mean, she was, she was born in this country, but she went straight back to Nigeria. Her lived experience is totally unlike anybody else's, but she felt that she understood. And the idea that I can't remember who said it, but the idea that any MP knows what it's like to go to a food bank, of course, is moonshine.
But, I mean, this isn't what Penny Mordaunt said. Penny Mordaunt said it's about, living. I need to pull up the exact quote, but, I mean, she didn't necessarily tie it to bitter experience or poverty. And, I mean, the problem with the logic of saying I'm a politician who gets it is that you can't possibly explore all the opportunities and experiences that life offers. So, for instance, I know Alison Pearson on Twitter just said a pop at me from the Daily Telegraph. Penny Mordaunt hasn't experienced what it is to be a parent. So how? And she's saying, I understand the voters. Well, how can you understand what it is to be a mum?
Nobody can understand everything. I mean, men can't understand what it's like to be women. I mean, women.
So we try and imagine, and we empathise.
Margaret Thatcher was good at portraying, although she was completely, basically out of touch with normal voters. But they felt that she understood what they were going through, and she felt it, she empathised, whereas her lived experience, OK, she had a relatively humble background, but to be able to get across to the red wall, the blue wall is, it's not easy, and that's why I think that the two candidates we're almost certainly going to be left with, and the three we've got left with now, I actually think Penny would probably appeal better to the red wall. than either of the other two, but I think Kemi would have been the one who would have really cut through. But anyway, I must stop living in the past. She's gone.
And we must stop using the phrase lived experience.
We must. I only used it once and never again.
Christine, thanks very much indeed. Coming up, Harry spoke out, Prince Harry that is, spoke out yesterday on climate change and COVID and other subjects to the UN General Assembly. We will talk to Angela Levin about that and other royal stories. Stand by.
Hello, I'm Aidan McGivern from the Met Office. Extraordinary temperatures today with the UK seeing highs over 40 Celsius for the first time on record. It is turning cooler, you may be pleased to hear, with much fresher air arriving from the west, along with some showers. We're already seeing that happen in the southwest, across parts of Wales and Northern Ireland. A couple of cold fronts making their way in from the west. They will displace the heat over the next 24 hours. They will bring some showers into the Midlands, eastern England during the evening. Some welcome relief, I think, from the excessively high temperatures during the afternoon. And then overnight, well, that fresher air arrives, but still a fairly muggy night. 18 in Cardiff, 20 in London, 14 for Belfast and Glasgow. And it's a fine start, actually, for eastern and central parts of the country. Some sunshine first thing. Thicker cloud for Wales, the southwest, Northern Ireland, as well as parts of Scotland with a few showers around. Now, the temperatures will rise through the day, nowhere near as high as we've seen during Tuesday, but enough to bring the risk of showers or thunderstorms to central and southeastern parts of the country. Perhaps some very lively downpours. 28 Celsius in London, 30 possible for eastern England, but a fresher low to mid-20s for western areas and high teens, low 20s for Scotland and Northern Ireland. Any showers or thunderstorms clear through during Wednesday evening, and then overnight clear spells once again. And by this time, it really will be a fresher night with temperatures in the south, 15 or 16 Celsius, 12 or 13 for Scotland and Northern Ireland. Then some low cloud to begin things on Thursday across eastern and central England. A few spots of rain out of this. Some showers for the northwest of Scotland as well, but the cloud in the east will tend to lift. And Thursday's looking like a mostly dry day with some sunny spells and temperatures closer to average. Showers on Friday and a few around as well on Saturday.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
And the national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here. You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, mate. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Well, Prince Harry may no longer be a working royal, but he's not averse to using that HRH title, royal pedigree, to secure some big gigs on the world stage. Yesterday, he gave the main speech at the United Nations in New York. He expressed strong opinions about American politics. Some commentators said that was a breach of protocol. Let's turn to the royal writer Angela Levin, who can ponder on this one for us. Angela, if that had been his father making that speech, not just talking about politics, but another country's politics, he'd have been really well and truly clobbered. But I suppose Harry's people would say he's not a member of the royal family anymore. It doesn't matter.
No, but the Americans are absolutely furious with him because how dare an English prince with a title tell them what to do? How absolutely dare him? I mean, there's lots of comments today about they're absolutely furious with him. And when he talks about climate change and the problem it is and how it eats him up and all that thing, and he was going home in a private plane. You know, I mean, it's a sort of nonsensical hypocrisy there. But also, you cannot tell a government. He was very cross about the vote against abortion. But that's not his business, is it? And I think it took very much away from the focus on Mandela. This was an annual occasion where they talk about Mandela and recognise him. And actually, it ended up being an attack on the United States of America. However, he looks absolutely terrible. He looks so unhappy, so drained, and as if the world is coming to an end. And what was very interesting is that he was sitting on his seat with Meghan next door, of course, and she took his arm and he pushed it back, and she grabbed it with one hand and held onto the arm with the other one. So he really couldn't move. He was trying to wriggle and he couldn't. And I thought, what an extraordinary thing to do at the United Nations. There's lots of photographs of it. And you look at it and you see this is not somebody showing love or anything, because they didn't look at each other. She did it, and he was looking over there and she was looking over here. So there's something was going on yesterday. But I think overall, I think he's very, very lost. And he's trying to hold on to his mother's magic. And if that means, and that will give him power. Every day he thinks about her and what she would like him to do. But I think it's not a very healthy way, actually. Think about her, but not try and get her to tell him what to do when he's landing in hot water.
Well, it was a political speech, and he's unlikely to be a politician, but you wonder whether in time his wife might head in that direction. Angela, we've got to leave it there, but really appreciate you coming in on such a hot day. Thanks very much indeed. It's gone 5 o'clock. Welcome to Brazier, some fast-paced news. From 5 until 6, in the next hour, Kemi Badenoch has become the latest Conservative leadership contender to be eliminated from the race. In the penultimate ballot before the contest is reduced to 2 final candidates, she received 59 votes. Liz Truss, next best on 86. Attention now turning to the supporters of Badenoch and whether they switch to Liz Truss or Penny Mordaunt, as the front-runner Rishi Sunak looks set pretty much near on set to be in the final runoff vote amongst Conservative members. There's been a record temperature also today of 40.2 degrees Celsius as the nation is gripped by a sweltering heatwave. While many have been outside enjoying the sunshine, there's also been widespread travel disruption. And London Fire Brigade declaring a major incident after a large-scale series of fires across the capital that stretch all the way into the home counties today. With me for the next hour or so, the author and broadcaster Christine Hamilton. But first, the latest news headlines with Polly.
Colin, thank you. The top stories at 5 minutes past on GB News. As you've been hearing, the London Fire Brigade has declared a major incident in response to a huge surge in fires across the capital today. during today's record-breaking heatwave. 100 firefighters are currently tackling a blaze which has spread to a residential area in Wennington in East London. Meanwhile, 2 grass fires have broken out as well in Kent. We understand 12 fire engines tackling the blazes at Dartford Heath and Joyce Green. Kent Fire and Rescue Service warning drivers on the A2 to take extra care as the smoke is causing reduced visibility on that road. And all this coming as the UK has a temperature of over 40 degrees Celsius for the first time ever. The Met Office saying a provisional reading of 40.3 degrees has been measured at Coningsby in Lincolnshire. Red extreme heat warnings continue for millions of people across England, with amber warnings for most of Britain. And last night, temperatures didn't fall below 25 degrees Celsius in some places, making it the UK's hottest night on record. National Rail has told people to only travel as absolutely necessary. Many train services across the country have been cancelled. Now, a major search operation is underway for a missing swimmer in Essex. The Coast Guard have confirmed 5 swimmers were rescued from the water around Clacton Pier and 2 have been taken to hospital. Emergency services are currently trying to find a 4th swimmer. Well, away from news about the weather, in the employment sector, workers are to receive their highest pay rise for more than 2 decades. Over 1 million NHS staff, that includes nurses, paramedics and midwives, will get a pay rise of at least £1,400, with lowest earners receiving up to 9.3%. Eligible dentists and doctors will also receive 4.5%, and police officers are being offered 5%. So politics then, and Kemi Badenoch is out of the Conservative leadership race. Former Chancellor Rishi Sunak secured most of the votes with support from 118 MPs. The Trade Minister, Penny Mordaunt, came in second with 92 votes. The Foreign Secretary, Liz Truss, secured 86 votes. The next and final ballot among MPs takes place tomorrow. Candidates due to be whittled down to the final 2. Then the Conservative Party will choose the next Prime Minister. Tory MP Justin Tomlinson was backing Kemi Badenoch.
She didn't think she'd survive those early rounds, and each round we went up, and the momentum was very much with us. A huge amount of excitement and intrigue amongst colleagues, and frankly, she was a breath of fresh air that added that extra layer of intrigue to this contest. And I'm just disappointed, genuinely disappointed, that we couldn't get her over the line today. We had a lot of conversations, but we couldn't just quite do it. But to come forth from that standing start with it's something that all of us can be very proud of.
Well, as the race to replace him ramps up, Boris Johnson has chaired his final cabinet meeting. The Prime Minister defending his record on tackling COVID and steering the economy through the pandemic and the cost of living crisis. Mr Johnson has also reaffirmed the government's commitment to reaching net zero emissions by 2050. Wages are falling at the fastest rate since records began, when taking into account rising prices. The latest data from the ONS showed paychecks dropped by 3.7% over the last 3 months to May when compared against inflation. Meanwhile, the number of UK workers on payrolls has risen by 31,000 to 29.6 million between May and June. However, grocery bills have increased by over £450 over the last year. Retail research group Kantar says the increase in food and drink prices comes as inflation hit the second highest level on record. Dog food, butter and milk are some of the products that have risen fastest over the last 12 months. You're up to date on GB News. More news as it happens. Now back to Brazier.
Six minutes past 5 and still very hot. Britain basting really in record-breaking temperatures today. A new UK high, 40.2 Celsius recorded in West London, the weather station there at Heathrow Airport. And the capital city felt the heat in a different way, a destructive way too. Within the last couple of hours, London Fire Brigade declaring a major incident. We'll tell you about one also being declared in the Midlands after London's firefighters were called out to tackle multiple blazes. Social media filled with pictures of fires in various locations across London and beyond. Let's turn to Mark White, our home editor, who's covering this for you this afternoon. Mark, let's talk about Leicestershire first, shall we? Because we did wonder that this had to be more than London, and lo, it comes to pass.
Yes, absolutely. The conditions elsewhere in the country, north of London in particular, they're really feeling the heat now. In fact, the new record temperature, I think, has just been set, 40.3. I think it's in Lincolnshire. So an indication that the real heat that's packed into this hot wave is spreading up further from London now. So Leicestershire Fire and Rescue have said that they have declared, like London Fire Brigade, a major incident because of the unprecedented number of incidents, grass fires and alike, that they are attending in Leicester, in Leicestershire, right across the region, and in Rutland. They've said that they won't, for the time being, be attending automatic fire alarm calls, which is part and parcel of the emergency response that they would normally give. They will only answer 999 calls to bona fide fire calls. So that's what they're doing in Leicestershire. Maybe that other fire and rescue services follow suit. We know that there is high demand in a number of fire and rescue services, particularly around the home counties, in London, of course, but also in Kent as well, where they're dealing with a number of major grassland fires, not far from where these outbreaks are in East London towards Dartford. Wennington is one village that's been struck. It was a grassland fire. The wind shifted and then the flames went back and engulfed quite a number of houses. I was just looking at some of the latest pictures, still rows of houses on fire there. So an absolutely devastating scene in that village.
And Christine Hamilton, looking at some of the pictures taken from a car as it's going by, I mean, you could be mistaken thinking you're in southern Spain. Or
Absolutely, or Australia, somewhere in the outback. It's not what you see in this country, is it?
It is today. I mean, we're the hottest place in Europe today.
Wow. I'm just looking at that list, just to give you, and bear with me, guys, because this, I think, sums it up rather well. This is where the fires are currently in London, and London Fire Brigade, who've declared a major incident, are deployed. I'll rattle through it. 30 fire engines in Upminster, 15 fire engines, Wennington, 12 fire engines, Pinner, 10 fire engines, Southgate, 8 in Croydon, 8 in Dagenham, 8 in Wembley, half a dozen in Hendon, 4 Croydon, and 4 in Eltham. It's a really, really busy day for the firefighters, who are clad, of course, in their protective gear, battling blazes and temperatures in excess of 40 degrees. Our thanks to Mark White. Let's move on to politics now. The candidates vying for the leadership of the Conservative Party have been whittled down to 3 after Kemi Badenoch was eliminated from the contest a couple of hours ago. It follows Tom Tugendhat's exit from the race last night after receiving 31 votes. All eyes will now be on whether Kemi Badenoch's 59 supporters switch allegiance to Liz Truss or Penny Mordaunt, as Rishi Sunak looks near to securing his place in the final 2, with 118 votes needing 120 to reach the final runoff. Let's turn to our political editor, Darren McCaffrey. Darren, welcome to you. Should we just talk a little bit about Kemi Badenoch? Because, you know, a fortnight ago, nobody outside of politics really knew who she was. She was certainly not a household name. I mean, she isn't necessarily now, but golly, she's burst onto the scene.
She really has, and run a very effective campaign, getting the backing of senior Conservatives like Michael Gove, who clearly felt that even though it's fair to say she's not the most experienced, or hadn't been the most experienced candidate in this contest, that she had something new and fresh to say, had an ideological kind of rock, if you like, that went right through her, and that she was able to, in many ways, represent a section of the party within the Conservative Party that had not been represented either, it must be said, under Boris Johnson, Theresa May or David Cameron. And yes, she has definitely made an impression. She's performed incredibly well in this contest, and there is little doubt, I think, that she will at some stage, Colin, be in a future Conservative cabinet. I mean, I saw someone today suggesting a future Home Secretary. That is not beyond the realms of possibility, I would suggest, given the effectiveness with which she's run this campaign, and also the support she's built up, not just within the parliamentary party, but also within the wider Conservative Party too.
Feels down on the basis of the numbers we're looking at today. Though even as I read that introduction talking about supporters, I was thinking, they appear to be supporters. You can't take any of these votes completely for granted. Some of them are borrowed. It's in flux. But on the basis of what we saw, Liz Truss had a better day than Penny Mordaunt.
Yeah, indeed. So let's talk through the numbers first of all, but let's do it on a pretty superficial level. As you say, Liz has had a pretty good day, up 15, which is quite substantial, to 86 MPs backing her. She's now within touching distance of Penny Mordaunt, who only increased her number by 10 to 92. Rishi Sunak, though, just up 3 to 118. He is within a hair's breadth of that magic number of 120, that number he needs to get into at the final two, if you like. What's fascinating about all of this, though, is Tom Tugendhat, you would have thought, where would his supporters go? Surely quite a few of them would have gone to Rishi Sunak. And yeah, his own numbers have only gone up by 3. So what is at play here? Is there something a little bit fishy? After all, even Conservative MPs would describe themselves as duplicitous and also treacherous in terms of how they vote in these elections. So is it possible that maybe, just maybe, some of Rishi Sunak's supporters lent a couple of votes to Liz Truss in this round to ensure that she did better than people expected? I don't know. We may never know, but this is politics and nothing is beyond the realms of possibility. So where does this leave us tomorrow? You're right in pointing out, where would Badenoch's votes go? You would have thought probably quite a few of them would go to Liz Truss. They're on the same wing, the right wing of the Conservative Party, or at least they portray themselves that they are. Though economically, it must be said, Kemi Badenoch and Rishi Sunak have been on the same page when it comes to tackling the debt rather than taxation, first of all. So it's quite difficult to judge in that way. And if there are some black arts at work here, if there is the determination by Rishi Sunak's camp to keep Penny Mordaunt out of the last two, again, would they feel bold and brave enough to ensure that they maybe lend a few votes that Liz Truss gets into the final two? Really fascinating stuff, still entirely unpredictable. It does seem almost certain Rishi Sunak, unless they mess it up, will end up in the final two. Who it is, though, between Penny Mordaunt and Liz Truss, my guess at this moment is just a guess, is it probably will be the Foreign Secretary. You know, frankly, who knows? And I really mean that. I'm in Parliament here, and I don't think anyone would actually put a substantial sum of money behind anyone saying they definitely know who's going to end up in those final two places.
Darren, thanks very much indeed. Darren McCaffrey there. Christian Hamilton's alongside. Who's your money on?
Well, I'm afraid my horse has bolted or fallen. It would have been Kemi. What worries me about Rishi is that, I mean, he's possibly one of the most socialist chancellors we've had, and we've now got the highest tax burden for 70 years. And if he's going to be Prime Minister, whoever he appoints as Chancellor will presumably go on the same path. I think, I may have this right, I find it terribly confusing who said what, but I think Liz Truss, she's the one, who has said that the COVID debt should be treated like a war debt and we should pay it off over 50 years. Now, that, I think, is sensible. It's no good saying we can't leave it to future generations. We can't actually dump it all on the current generation either. So, I mean, I agree with her about that, but you know, they're part of the establishment in the wider sense of the word that's got us where we are now. They were both part of this massive COVID lockdown business, which is the cause of so many of our economic problems. And we all thought he was wonderful, dishy, rishy when he was handing out money and go and have a free meal on me and all that sort of thing. But, I mean, looking back, it was crazy. And the whole lockdown business, which they both supported, was crazy. Now, how they argued in the secrecy of the cabinet, I don't know. But I just feel that the Tory party has lost a golden opportunity to have a really fresh start. And I despair, goodness knows who it is. I mean, I'm not a Tory, so even if I was a Tory, I probably would be a member. So I'd be one of those over 60s whites living in the South who would have a vote, but I'm not.
Rishi wasn't saying have a meal on me, he was saying have a meal on the taxpayer.
Sorry, you asked extremely important differentiation.
Government doesn't have money, it's taxpayers' money. The Deputy Editor of Conservative Home is Henry Hill, who joins us now to look at today's results. Henry, welcome to you. Thoughts first on Kemi Badenoch, the difference she made to this campaign?
I think that Kemi is definitely the one who's probably come out of this best. Rishi Sunak was always the front runner, even if his position was weaker than it was perhaps a few months ago. Penny had a very strong start, but has since struggled a bit, although we can't rule her out getting to the final two. But Kemi, given where she started, has come from absolutely nowhere and really established herself as a voice and a figure on the right wing of the Conservative Party.
take a slightly sideways look at this a little bit. I mean, as somebody who's deputy editor of Conservative Home, the sort of digital salon for conservative thinking, what's the sense in which this is pushing ratings, that this is actually generating sufficient interest to move the dial for you guys? I mean, is this a contest of ideas and personalities that is attracting rather than repelling people from conservative politics?
I think that hopefully the second round will do better in terms of actually engaging people with conservative politics. I think obviously leadership elections are always great box office for Conservative Home specifically, but in terms of the actual party, I think the decision to have these televised debates for the early rounds was counterproductive because the format doesn't suit having 5 people on television. You just end up with this sort of 5-way brawl, far more heat than light, lots of damaging attacks and very little, relatively speaking, by way of actual scrutiny. So I don't think the party has really covered itself in glory in the early rounds, but hopefully if we end up with 2 good candidates, then the fact that the second round, the members' round, where those 2 candidates will be campaigning up and down the country for a solid month, will give us a chance to show that actually the Conservative Party is still a party where the challenges facing the country are being seriously thought about, where there's a proper debate and that people can put their faith in it.
Henry Hill, appreciate your time as ever. Thanks very much indeed. Just away from the politics, we've been covering the fires in and around London, especially London Fire Brigade declaring a major incident. Scores and scores and scores of their firefighters and appliances out and about dealing with fires. Oftentimes it have been started on grassland or in arable fields that then has spread sometimes to businesses and indeed whole clutches of homes. One such place, Wennington. Let's speak to the Mayor of Havering, who's Trevor McKeever, also a former firefighter, coincidentally, who's at the scene of that particular blaze. Trevor McKeever, thanks ever so much for your time. Just for people who aren't au fait with where you are, just paint a picture for us. Which part of the world are you in?
I'm here down in Rainham in Essex. Some people would know it as the old A13, and it's just before you get to the Dartford Tunnel, which is about half a mile off to our right-hand side.
Which is why I think I'm right in saying, Trevor, we've seen pictures posted online of smoke that's been billowing across or drifting across the M25. Is that right?
Yes, that's correct. Fire Brigade were called just before 12-ish, I do believe, to a rapidly developing fire in the fields, which just so happens it's behind the back of Wennington Fire Station. Obviously, the crews responded very quickly, and almost immediately it went to a 12-pump fire.
It's a silly question on one level, Trevor. But why is it spreading so quickly? Presumably, it's just a tinderbox.
Yes, exactly. It is a tinderbox. We've had so much dry weather. You've got a little bit of a wind today that's aiding the spread of the flames. So it's a combination of the two. And obviously, the guys, like the firefighters who are working really hard down here, have to get the water in place first off as well. So, no, the guys are working their socks off really, really well down here.
And we need to spare a thought for them, don't we, today? Because not only are they dealing with a succession of different fires, but also working in protective gear, in the protective clothing that they have to wear in 40-degree heat. Goodness me.
Yes, I can confirm that. Being a former firefighter, I know how hot it is to work in this gear. I've had this happen to myself several times, but not quite in this heat. So that's why I responded when the call went out to bring down.
Trevor McKeever is the Mayor of Havering, but as you heard as well, a former firefighter, with some interesting thoughts there from the scene of one of the blazes that's been sparked today, the hottest day in this country's recorded history. Christine Hamilton is alongside me. Christine, who'd be a firefighter today?
Oh, well, not me. I always take my hat off to them anyway, even if they're dealing with a fire in the middle of winter, but to be dealing them in these circumstances, I mean, hell on earth, frankly. I wouldn't be surprised if we didn't have some firefighters suffering heat exhaustion, etc.
Yeah. We tend to focus on London. We're hearing reports from as far-flung as Leicestershire. We've now got the highest temperature, 40.3, just posted in Lincolnshire. It's got to just shift this on a little bit, because we get a mailbag of people saying, you're catastrophising, it's just the summer. And I'm a little bit conflicted. Are you?
Well, I don't think it is catastrophising to report on all these blazes. I do wonder what's happening elsewhere in the country. I mean, you think places like sort of Exmoor, for example, which must be absolutely tinder dry, whether they're having any problems down there. No, I don't think so. I mean, I think fires... You listed the number of fire engines that were being deployed. I mean, that's a serious number. I don't know how many we've got in the whole country, but no, I think that sort of fire... And it's engulfing houses and things, and before you know it, somebody would have lost their life. So I don't think it is catastrophising. I am fed up to the back teeth of all the nanny state rubbish that we've been told about how to deal with the heat. I mean, honestly, we do know, thank you very much, what to do. It's absurd. We've all been treated like little children. You know, don't do this, don't do that. Wear a hat, drink plenty of water.
And on it goes. Christine Fennell, thanks very much indeed. Coming up, we'll speak to the weatherman, John Ketley. John was talking to us last week, wasn't he, saying he thought it might get to 40 today, and it was quite a milestone. Well, he was right. It is 40.3 in Lincolnshire, just recorded record-breaking temperatures. First, we'll bring you the weather.
Hello, I'm Aidan McGivern from the Met Office. Extraordinary temperatures today, with the UK seeing highs over 40 Celsius for the first time on record. It is turning cooler, you may be pleased to hear, with much fresher air arriving from the west, along with some showers. We're already seeing that happen in the southwest, across parts of Wales and Northern Ireland. A couple of cold fronts making their way in from the west. They will displace the heat over the next 24 hours. They will bring some showers into the Midlands, eastern England during the evening. Some welcome relief, I think, from the excessively high temperatures during the afternoon. And then overnight, well, that fresher air arrives, but still a fairly muggy night. 18 in Cardiff, 20 in London, 14 for Belfast and Glasgow. And it's a fine start, actually, for eastern and central parts of the country. Some sunshine first thing. Thicker cloud for Wales, the southwest, Northern Ireland, as well as parts of Scotland, with a few showers around. Now, the temperatures will rise through the day, nowhere near as high as we've seen during Tuesday, but enough to bring the risk of showers or thunderstorms to central and southeastern parts of the country. Perhaps some very lively downpours. 28 Celsius in London, 30 possible for eastern England, but a fresher low to mid-20s for western areas and high teens, low 20s for Scotland and Northern Ireland. Any showers or thunderstorms clear through during Wednesday evening, and then overnight clear spells once again. And by this time, it really will be a fresher night, with temperatures in the south, 15 or 16 Celsius, 12 or 13 for Scotland and Northern Ireland. Then some low cloud to begin things on Thursday across eastern and central England. A few spots of rain out of this. Some showers for the northwest of Scotland as well, but the cloud in the east will tend to lift, as Thursday's looking like a mostly dry day with some sunny spells and temperatures closer to average. Showers on Friday and a few around as well on Saturday.
Hello, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
Make sure that you join us Monday to Thursday, 10 a.m. until midday, right here on GB News for To The Point.
We're not afraid to talk about the topics that matter to you, or the big topics that always matter.
We cover absolutely everything, from the breaking political stories of the day to law and order, what's going on in the channel. We're not afraid to hold people to account.
We always make sure we include your views on our show.
Indeed, if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we're saying it. So make sure you join the conversation with us, 10 a.m. until midday, Monday to Thursday, for To The Point on GB News. We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, Matt. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Well, the Met Office says temperatures have topped 40 degrees Celsius for the first time in the UK. Heathrow Airport, weather station there, recording a temperature of 40.2. That was at lunchtime. That was matched at Coningsby in Lincolnshire at 3 o'clock this afternoon. And I think another location actually in Lincolnshire has taken it to 40.3. And within the last 10 minutes, we hear from the Met Office a provisional reading of less than that, of 34.8. But that is in Charter Hall in the Scottish borders near Kelso, between Kelso and Coldstream. That is a Scottish record, the highest temperature recorded in Scotland, 34.8 degrees in the borders in the last few minutes. Well, the government's issued its first red warning for extreme heat, meaning even the fit and healthy at risk of injury or death. It's just been reported on that note that since the heatwave began, there have been 13 deaths in open water. So this is people going into the water and drowning in the hot temperatures. The Met Office, the warning, it covers an area including London, Leeds, Birmingham, Cambridge, Manchester and York. An amber warning for Wales and southern Scotland also in place. The heat is causing disruption too to the transport infrastructure. Rail passengers in England and Wales especially told to travel only if it's strictly necessary and not to travel at all northwards from London. Passengers have been warned of cancellations, last-minute schedule changes and disruption across the network. Some critics, however, say the government's guilty of catastrophising. Well, is it? I wonder. We're joined by the weatherman John Ketley, who joins us now. John Ketley, welcome to you. We talked, I think, last week, or beginning of last week, wasn't it? And you were worried about what was coming this week. And you thought we might get to 40, and lo, it has come to pass.
Yes, I was really quite confident, Colin, as you probably remember. And I think it's quite good if you've got a consistency of weather computer diagrams that show the same sort of thing from day to day across different models. And that's exactly what's happened. I was expecting 41 somewhere today, perhaps somewhere around Lincolnshire out towards South Yorkshire, Doncaster, that sort of area, maybe down the A1, Stamford. So it could still happen, I suppose, when all the figures are in. We could still see somebody getting 41 rather than 40.3 at Coningsby. And I can tell you here, where I am in Lincoln, it's an absolute furnace outside, so I'm very pleased to be joining you indoors.
John, what is the peak time of day? I know it seems a daft question, but it seems to me, I've sort of a memory of it being hotter earlier in the day. I mean, that's my faulty memory, I'm sure. But when is the peak heat time?
Well, there's a bit of inertia when you come. When you're looking at the weather machine, there is some inertia. It takes a bit of time for the heat to rise and get out into the atmosphere because it's heating the ground more quickly than it's heating the air. So it takes a few hours. But you generally say this time of the year, middle of summer, you're probably looking at the peak time around about 3:30 to 4:30, strangely enough. It takes a lot of time for that heat to be generated everywhere. And of course, in towns and cities, a lot of that heat's still coming off the buildings. So that's the reason you get a very late afternoon maximum temperature.
And hereafter, a cooling, a relative cooling.
Yes, a relative cooling. It's still going to be a pretty stuffy night across East Anglia and South East England. We've still got temperatures tonight around 20 degrees or so, a bit higher perhaps in the London area after these very high figures today. But yes, there is some cooling going on. It's certainly turning cooler and fresher and wetter actually over Northern Ireland and Western Scotland at the moment, northwest Scotland. And we've had some showers moving north across Wales and southwest England during the day as well. Now, they're still coming, so there's still a chance of some refreshing showers. I think people will be jumping in the streets this evening if you get a shower. And that could be repeated again tomorrow afternoon as we see the temperatures drop, but at the same time kick up the atmosphere a little bit more, makes it more buoyant during the afternoon tomorrow across parts of the Midlands, southeast, East Anglia. You could see one or two sharper thunderstorms perhaps across those eastern parts. Now, they'll be very hit and miss. Some places could catch a real downpour for half an hour or so before they move away again. The main thing is, of course, we are losing this heat, and thankfully, for most people, that'll be great. But of course, if you're on holiday, you can't get too much of it. You can jump in the sea and it's fine. But when you're inland, when you're landlocked, it becomes very, very intense.
One final thought. I observe that in covering this story, we seem to have lost sight, perhaps it's been going on for a few days now, we seem to have lost sight of what for me is the, no pun intended, burning question as to how we got here. And last week you mentioned, and I hope this isn't too technical, but you mentioned something that goes all the way back to Portugal that really caught your eye. Can you explain again?
Very good memory, very good memory. Good skills, Colin, very good indeed. What I was looking at, actually, was the positioning of the jet stream. Now, nobody else has confirmed this, it's just my feeling about it. But the positioning of the jet stream as we went into the weekend and the start of this week was that there was a cooler pool of air across the northwest of Spain and Portugal, and that was actually having the effect of pushing down cooler air into western parts of Spain and Portugal, at the same time pushing up hotter air up through Spain, up into France, and then on into the UK. So that's really what's happened, I think. We've seen some slight cooling going on across the southern part of Spain in the past few days. If you remember, a week ago, I was talking about temperatures having reached 45 in Seville. Well, they're not that high now, and we've actually matched the temperature across a large part of Spain and many parts of France today. So we're not the hottest place in Europe, it has to be said, but we're pretty close to it. But I think that hotter air, that hotter plume, the Spanish plume, has moved further north into the UK, at least for 48 hours before it heads away eastwards again tomorrow.
John Ketley, appreciate your time as ever. Thanks a lot. Coming up, we're going to speak to Nick Buckley about a cancelled free speech event in Manchester. First, latest news headlines with Polly.
Colin, thank you. Major incidents have been declared by both the London Fire Brigade and Leicester Fire and Rescue Service due to a surge in grass fires and ground fires across those regions. Around 100 firefighters are currently tackling a blaze which has spread to a residential area now in Wennington in East London. People are also removing gas canisters from their pubs and restaurants in the village amid fears of explosions. We'll bring you more on that as it comes to us. And as the UK has a temperature of over 40 degrees for the first time ever, the Met Office is saying a provisional reading of 40.2 degrees has been measured at Heathrow in London. Red extreme heat warnings continue for millions of people in England, amber warnings for most of Britain. And a major search operation is underway for a missing swimmer in Essex. The Coast Guard has confirmed 5 swimmers were rescued from the water around Clacton Pier and 2 have been taken to hospital. The emergency services are currently trying to locate a 4th swimmer. Politics, and Kemi Badenoch is out of the Conservative Party leadership race. The former Chancellor Rishi Sunak secured the most votes with support from 118 MPs. The Trade Minister, Penny Mordaunt, came in with 92 votes, and the Foreign Secretary, Liz Truss, secured 86. The next and final ballot among MPs takes place tomorrow. Candidates are going to be whittled down to the final 2. Some public sector workers are to receive their highest pay rise for more than 2 decades. Over 1 million NHS staff, including nurses, paramedics and midwives, will get a pay rise of at least £1,400, with the lowest earners to receive up to 9.3%. Eligible dentists and doctors will receive 4.5% and police officers 5%. That's it. You're up to date on TV, online and on your radio via DAB+. Now back to Brazier.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, mate. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Well, if you missed it, at around about exactly 3 o'clock, in fact, we've got the latest twist in the Conservative leadership election. This time it was Kemi Badenoch who wasn't able to get sufficient numbers of MPs behind her to keep her in the race, but she certainly had, by most measures, quite an impact on the contest. Let's turn to one of her supporters, wonder where his vote's going now. That is the Conservative MP, Ben Bradley, who was supporting Kemi Badenoch in the leadership contest. Ben Bradley, welcome to you. Where does your vote go now?
Fair question. I'll let you know when I figure that one out. For tonight, it's been a busy few weeks. I think I want to emphasise just how well Kemi's done from a standing start. Relatively unknown 10, 12 days ago to being one of the foremost figures in British politics as things stand today. That's an incredible achievement for her and her team. As for my vote, I think the key thing today is I want to draw a bit of a line, draw breath, turn my phone off, probably have a glass of wine, and I'll consider that in the morning.
Why was her message so refreshing? What was it she was saying that was so radically different?
I think I felt for a long time that I've talked about signposts and weather vanes, right? We've had a lot of leaders for decades, to be honest, who have kind of followed the polls and blown in the wind to some extent. I really like the fact that Kemi is brave and unapologetic about what she believes in. She's stood up in those really difficult conversations on culture or race or gender, and she's had a view, and often at times with the common sense view of my constituents. But across the board in this policy piece, she's been saying the kind of things that maybe aren't broadly popular on Twitter, but actually that I think most of the country really back and believe in. That's been really refreshing. So it's a shame she's gone out today, but I know she's achieved so much in this last week that she'll have a real positive role in the next government.
Ben Bradley, I've got Christine Hamilton with me in the studio, bursting with a question. Here it comes.
Ben, yes. What I want to know is, I mean, I was a supporter of Kemi as well. I think she has done sensationally well. I'm horrified that she's gone out. Why do your colleagues not see that they've shot themselves in the foot? This was going to be an amazing fresh start. The Tories would have been presenting the Labour Party with a hell-on-a-stick problem. How would they have dealt with it? Why on earth can't your colleagues see that? We're just lumbered now with more of the same.
Yeah, it's frustrating. The question I will be asking all those other leaders is, what are you going to do differently? What are you going to change in terms of personnel and policy and reinvent? Because we do need to do that. I think Kemi was the right person to do that. Frustrating in some ways that those who supported Tom, who said they wanted change, clearly didn't back Kemi in this round today, which is incredibly frustrating. But I was saying to a colleague earlier that in this place it's frustrating. You become an MP, but you're not in charge of anything until you get into government. So the country speaks. And then actually it's 4, 5, 6 years before that intake and that group of MPs who were elected on that ticket are actually in charge of anything. We could have accelerated that with Kemi. I'm frustrated that we haven't.
Have you done?
Me too.
Have you done? Ben Bradley, just a thought. I don't know if you heard what the Prime Minister said at the dispatch box yesterday. I mean, it may have been the final time we see him at the dispatch box if he doesn't do PMQs next week, and some people think he'll be heading abroad for a foreign trip. So that was it. And certainly listening to his words, it felt like him offering his interpretation of his political legacy. One thing that struck me, and I don't think I got a lot of commentary, but I wonder if you'll offer me a view, is that he talked at one stage about the deep state. He said the deep state will try and claw back Brexit. They'll try and to unwind Brexit and take Britain back into the European Union. I mean, I get what he said with deep state, and for me that sounds like the new establishment. We know what that looks like. But for some people, the deep state it's Donald Trump, it's the Tea Party, it's conspiracy theories. Are you comfortable with that kind of language?
I don't know about the language. I understand the point he's trying to get at, which is that we've seen all the way through, go back to Brexit in 2016, the establishment, the kind of understood or accepted view of Westminster and this place is not the same as in the country. And I think that Boris is right. For all the unfortunately self-inflicted issues, he has been absolutely bang on issues like Brexit, on issues like some of the cultural challenges, on levelling up and trying to speak to parts of the country that don't buy into all of that kind of newspeak, if you like, in terms of what this place often wants to do, that often doesn't chime with the country. My fear, I suppose, going forward is that where Boris, to his credit, has stood up to that on a number of issues, I want to make sure our next leader does the same. Again, I thought Kemi was going to be strong and brave enough to do that. That's my challenge to future leaders. Let's not go backwards. Let's recognise that we've started to speak to a part of the country, or parts of the country we've never been able to do before. Let's not lose that connection. Let's deliver on the promises we've made to them.
Can I just invite you to go backwards briefly? I'm just looking back at the Boris Johnson premiership, and I just wonder how many of your constituents have said to you, Ben Bradley, getting rid of him was a mistake?
A few. There are still a lot of fans in my part of the world. I was elected in 2017, so just before Boris, but a lot of colleagues in this place won off the back of that 2019 election, which was all about him. It was almost presidential in the style of it. I think he's got a lot of big policy calls right, whether that's on removing the kind of COVID restrictions, on vaccinations, on levelling up, which is going to be hugely important to my community. And as I say, that levelling up bill that's going through Parliament absolutely must continue because we've made a lot of promises to those communities. So he has got a legacy there that I hope people won't unpick those good parts of it. I supported him till the end for those reasons. I guess in the end it kind of stacks up that just one too many misjudgments, frankly, and a lot of it was self-inflicted. But all the reasons I think he could have been brilliant, and I really hope he had managed to do that, something totally different and to change things, unfortunately were kind of his downfall in the end.
Ben Bradley, really good to talk to you and appreciate your time. Thanks a lot. Now, a free speech event in Manchester, which was due to take place at the end of the month, it's been cancelled by the venue. The author, Nick Buckley, helped organise the Free Speech Matters event. It was to be held in the Quakers' Friends Meeting House in Manchester. The venue was approached for comment, and they said, Manchester Friends Meeting House routinely asks for lists of speakers appearing at public events in our building. We need to ensure that events will not conflict with Quaker values and will involve a safe and peaceful atmosphere. On this occasion, we were not assured that all the speakers would meet these criteria. Delighted to say Nick Buckley joins me now. Nick Buckley, welcome to you. Were you surprised it was cancelled?
I was actually. We had some very good discussions with them at the beginning, very upfront. But even the title of the event was even open, Free Speech Matters. It was about free speech.
What got them spooked?
I'm not 100% sure. They knew what the topic was. They said the only communication we had with them, they said they didn't want the audience to be inflamed and that would make the venue unsafe for people. So we said to them, well, we'll show you all the speeches. We'll share the speeches with you now, just so you can see what people are talking about. But they didn't want to see them. And if I had to be honest, I think they probably thought about it. And like everybody these days, they thought, is it really worth it? Is it worth complaints? Is it worth protests? And the whole event, it wasn't about topics. It was about free speech. So we had 3 questions we were going to answer, which was, what is free speech? Why is it important? And how do we protect it? They were the 3 questions we were addressing on the afternoon.
Am I right in Nick, that it was the Quakers, especially during World War I, who populated the ranks of conscientious objectors quite so much.
Yes, I mean, when you look at the Quaker history, they've often been on the so-called wrong side of what society thought at the time. They were instrumental in the fight against slavery. They used their free speech then to combat that evil trade. They also thought the votes for women was a great idea, so they used their free speech again to fight for women to get the vote. Then during the First World War, they didn't want to fight because it's against their religion, which is fair enough. So they were conscientious objectors. So there's been many times where people have branded them the others, but they use their free speech. And for them now to look at free speech in general, and let's be honest, they've just gone woke. I remember 2 years ago, they were one of the big buildings in Manchester City Centre that had Black Lives Matter plastered all over it. So they've just gone woke and forgot their own history.
Nick Buckley, I've just got Christine Hamilton with me in the studio. I think she's got a question. Christine.
Well, I've got two questions. I wondered if there was somebody on your list of speakers that they were objecting to. That's the first question, a particular person. And secondly, I was interested by what you said, that they possibly thought it's not worth it. And I think that is one of the great dangers of society at the moment. People, for understandable reasons, people think it's not worth the hassle, and it's not worth the hassle putting my head above the parapet on Twitter, on social media, which is why I think the views of a vast majority of people don't get heard, because people think, I'm not putting my head out there, I'm not going to do it.
Yeah, so two questions. The first question is, they were more concerned over one of the speakers more than others. That's true.
Wasn't J.K. Rowling, was it?
Unfortunately not. And they also offered us to go ahead with the event if we cancelled that one speaker. And my answer was, well, it wouldn't be a free speech event then, would it? It would be these people allowed to speak event. And I think when they talked about, I mean, we asked them, have you had any complaints? No. Have you had any threats? No. So what is this really about? And if I wanted to be fair to them, because they are lovely people, if I wanted to be fair, I would say they're also victims in this. Because the environment we've created over the last couple of decades means good Christian people are also afraid of the mob coming for them.
Exactly.
And what they, and they're just doing what everyone else does, which is personal convenience, and it's a shame.
It's understandable, but it's running scared, and it's a great shame.
Nick Buckley and Christine Hamilton, we're going to leave it there, but try and find somewhere else, Nick, maybe. Thanks for joining us. Our debate, should parents stay together for the sake of the kids? The Daily Mail columnist Max Pemberton has called on couples to stay married and avoid divorce where possible because it causes so much damage to families. The psychiatrist and doctor said that after writing a column on the topic, readers contacted him to say how glad they were that he was speaking about it. One teacher reportedly telling him it was the #1 cause of problems amongst children in the classroom. So we're asking, should parents stay together for their children? We're joined by the divorce coach, Sarah Davison, and Harry Benson, who's research director at the Marriage Foundation. Thanks for your time, both. Sarah Davison, welcome to you. There was a look on your face that struck me as one of incomprehension or derision. I'm not very good at reading people. What do you feel? What are you about to say?
Well, you're spot on there. I mean, I think the headline was "Stop being selfish and stay together for the kids." And, you know, I mean, divorce is not something to be rushed into, and it is known as one of the most traumatic experiences we go through in a lifetime. But, you know, if this is forced upon you, you don't have a lot of choice. And actually, there's so many different sides to this. You know, it does make me a little bit angry that they're saying it's selfish, because quite often it's selfish to stay in a relationship where you're teaching your kids what love and marriage is, what a healthy relationship looks like. You know, if it's toxic, if it's not healthy, if you're unhappy, then that is not a message that we want to set as a role model for our kids. And we also don't want to wrap our kids up in cotton wool, because when they get out in the real world, if they've never experienced some of life's challenges, they're not going to be able to cope themselves with getting dumped or having their heart broken or maybe not getting the job they want. So for so many reasons, I disagree with this.
Harry Benson.
Yeah. The short answer is it depends enormously. There are two situations which tend to be bad for kids. One is high conflict relationships, which continue, and that's a very small minority of relationships. And then there's the low conflict relationships, which end. And that does damage because, slightly counterintuitively, kids just don't see it coming. And you might think as parents that you're making it obvious that you're not happy in your relationship or that you're fighting, but the kids don't necessarily see that. And if that's the case, then what happens is that it undermines their trust in relationships because it comes out of the blue for them. And the vast majority of family breakdown comes from relationships that you could define as low conflict. We did one particular study a few years ago where we found that 6 out of 10 married couples who split reported that they were happy and not arguing often. Just a year earlier, and 8 out of 10 cohabiting couples said much the same thing. So the answer is, if you're in a low conflict relationship where things are basically not going well, but you're not fighting, then yeah, absolutely you should stick at it. But if you're fighting cat and dog, then sure. I mean, there's every reason to say maybe it's time to call it a day.
Sarah Davison, do we listen enough to the kids who want their parents to stick together? If you ask them, they'd say, we want mum and dad to stick together. Do we heed their voices enough?
Well, again, all different ages of kids is going to have a variance on that. And some children are going to want their parents to stay together, and maybe it's just not the healthiest option. But, I see a lot of children who have grown up, their parents have got divorced, and they're saying to me, I wish they got divorced earlier because it would have made it so much easier growing up. And sometimes saying to your children, well, we stuck together for you, can leave those children with so much guilt that their parents were unhappy. And so, again, there's two sides to this all the time. And I agree with Harry. I know Harry, and I agree with him that it does depend and the situations, can all vary. But ultimately, I'm a strong believer that you have to do what's right for you in that moment. And there's different ways of getting divorced that don't have to damage children. It can be a valuable life lesson to help them navigate their own challenges later on in life, if it's handled correctly. And that's the important thing.
Guys, it's complicated and we've only scratched the surface, but we appreciate your time. We've got to leave it there. We're out of time, I'm afraid. Sarah Davison and Harry Benson, thanks both very much indeed. Michelle Dewberry is here to tell us what's coming up. Michelle.
Hello, Colin. Yes, of course. Now there are 3, so we'll be looking at the Tory leadership competition. Kemi Badenoch is out. I personally think that's the wrong decision, so I'm interested to see what the viewers think to that one. And also, Jess Phillips, the Shadow Minister for Domestic Violence, she's basically criticising the decision of a Premier League club not to suspend a player that's been accused and arrested for rape. So I'm wondering, do you think that's right? Should that be the process? If you get accused and then arrested of rape, should you be out of your job? Or should it be that's only the case until you're actually proven guilty? So I found that one a fascinating debate, so I'm looking forward to that conversation. Also, the number of people that are in work poverty is on the rise. What's the answer to this, Colin? Is it simply a case of higher wages, or is it slightly more complicated than that? And lastly, if you're caught having taken drugs multiple times, do you think it's fair that you could potentially lose your driving licence or even your passport? I think it's quite ridiculous. Again, interested into what the viewers have to say about that.
Michelle, thanks very much indeed. Looking forward to that. Our thanks to Christine Hamilton, who had a story to tell us, but we're out of time.
Oh, I can't bear it. It's a wonderful story about divorce.
Michelle's next.
It's a true story.
Hello, I'm Aidan McGivern from the Met Office. Extraordinary temperatures today, with the UK seeing highs over 40 Celsius for the first time on record. It is turning cooler, you may be pleased to hear, with much fresher air arriving from the west, along with some showers. We're already seeing that happen in the southwest, across parts of Wales and Northern Ireland. A couple of cold fronts making their way in from the west. They will displace the heat over the next 24 hours. They will bring some showers into the Midlands, eastern England during the evening. Some welcome relief, I think, from the excessively high temperatures during the afternoon. And then overnight, well, that fresher air arrives, but still a fairly muggy night. 18 in Cardiff, 20 in London, 14 for Belfast and Glasgow. And it's a fine start, actually, for eastern and central parts of the country. Some sunshine first thing. Thicker cloud for Wales, the southwest, Northern Ireland, as well as parts of Scotland with a few showers around. Now, the temperatures will rise through the day, nowhere near as high as we've seen during Tuesday, but enough to bring the risk of showers or thunderstorms to central and southeastern parts of the country. Perhaps some very lively downpours. 28 Celsius in London, 30 possible for eastern England, but a fresher low to mid-20s for western areas and high teens, low 20s for Scotland and Northern Ireland. Any showers or thunderstorms clear through during Wednesday evening, and then overnight clear spells once again. And by this time it really will be a fresher night with temperatures in the south, 15 or 16 Celsius, 12 or 13 for Scotland and Northern Ireland. Then some low cloud to begin things on Thursday across eastern and central England. A few spots of rain out of this. Some showers for the northwest of Scotland as well, but the cloud in the east will tend to lift. And Thursday's looking like a mostly dry day with some sunny spells and temperatures closer to average. Showers on Friday and a few around as well on Saturday.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only